Today, I am so excited to be talking to Sheri Crosby Wheeler. Welcome to the Uplifting Impact podcast. Now, you all know every time we get together, we have an awesome person. So let me tell you a little bit more about Sheri. Sheri is the Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion for Fossil Group, Inc. Fossil Group, Inc. is a global design, marketing, distribution, and innovation company with distinctive watches, accessories, and wearables that are all created from some of the greatest brands in the world. Now, I know this because when I was a child, all I wanted was a Fossil watch, right? I thought if I could get one, I have made it. And now I'm talking to their DEI leader, which makes me feel like I'm on that right path. So Sheri is a diversity leader, an employment lawyer, and an avid community volunteer. She's also a member of the State Bar of Texas and was honored as an outstanding young lawyer. She earned her JD from the University of Buffalo School of Law and a BA in sociology from Emory. Welcome, 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 Sheri.
Thank you, Deanna. Thank you for having me here. I'm excited to be here and have this discussion.
Absolutely. So one of the things we've been doing with some of our guests is actually starting with the question around what brings you joy?
What brings me joy? I will say, first of all, resting. I like to be still. And it's hard to do because sometimes when we're sitting there, we're thinking, I need to be doing something. I need to be, but like just to sit and be still and not do anything, that feels good to me. Obviously hanging out with my family and kind of, I don't know if you know that terminology, like joning on people, like when you hang out with your family and you're just messing with them and cracking jokes because they know underlying all of that is love. And so when we get together, it's just cracking jokes on each other. And that feels great. It's the best laughs. It feels so good. And that's kind of how you know that somebody's in your tight inner circle or a loved one, if you can just crack jokes on them and it's still okay. So those things bring me joy.
That's awesome. So my grandmother is no longer alive, but when she was, one of the things she would say to me all the time is that she'd say, Deanna, you need to go somewhere and sit down. And I miss that, right? Because so I really appreciate that you said like relaxing or just sitting still and the joy of that. Because sometimes, even though she's not here to tell me, sometimes I have to tell myself that, like, go somewhere and sit down.
Yeah. You can hear it. You can hear her. Just have a seat. Just have a sit down. Stop being so busy.
Yeah.
We're so busy.
Yeah.
Why? Like it's okay to just be.
So. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, good. I can take that as affirmation that maybe this is a moment I need to go somewhere and sit down. So thank you.
You know what? That sounds like a book title too. You write that book and the tribute to your grandma. The book is going to be called "Go Somewhere and Sit Down" and tell me, like, help people and guide them. People will grab that book. I'm telling you. I'm waiting for it when you write.
You may have spoken into existence. So we'll see. So Sheri, can you tell me a little bit? I'm always curious about people's pathways into diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And you and I both come from the legal field. So I'm curious, though, I'm assuming that your path is still different than mine, even though we come from the same sector. So could you share with our audience how you ended up doing the work that you're doing right now?
It's so interesting. You really want to, when people ask you that, you want to say, well, first I took this step and then I took this step, but that's not how it went. It really was kind of the opportunity presented itself and I said yes. It wasn't something that I was actually looking for at the time. I had transitioned out of practicing law. So the first transition that I made out of practicing law was to do compliance work because it's like legal compliance. Okay, they're related. Shortly after that, at the same company where I was, they asked me to do government relations. They're like, you have a law degree, you do the government relations work. I was like, I don't know anything about that, but okay, because I want to stay employed. And so then shortly, probably about a year and a half into the government relations work, they were looking to start an Office of Diversity and Inclusion and looking around, seeing who could do it. And Sheri, will you do it? And they asked me, and I'll tell you this, right off the bat, I was like, no. I didn't tell them no. In my head, I was like, no, I don't want to do it. I call it running scared. I was running scared from diversity and inclusion. And there were multiple reasons why. One, I knew this work was hard. I knew it was hard and I knew it was draining. Two, I was like, are they just asking me because I'm Black? That was a thought that went into my head. 3, I didn't want to get pigeonholed. I didn't want to be thought of as like, oh, okay, well, this is all that she can do in this company. And so there were a number of reasons why I was like, no, I don't want to do it. But then the reasons on the other side of doing it, first, my husband was like, we need to eat, so you're going to do it. That was first. But no, more seriously, if I thought about my legal career, diversity and inclusion was always in the background. I just didn't know that's what it was. So when I was I want to say a 3-year lawyer, I wrote an article. And it was back when the ABA Journal had this contest that you could write an article and you could win $7,500. And I was like, what? An article? And I'm going to win that much? Because I like competing. So I wrote this article, and the article just talked about how I felt as a young lawyer in the legal profession and how my first firm had never had any Black attorneys, and it was over 100 years old. Mm-hmm. Then I moved to another firm that did have Black attorneys, and I still felt just an outsider. I still felt isolated. And that article didn't say anything about diversity and inclusion, but that's what it was talking about. I didn't feel included. The law firms weren't diverse. And so that was early on in my career, and throughout my career, I was still doing things that pertain to diversity and inclusion. I was drawn towards it. But I was fighting it. But I went ahead and I said yes. And now I think about it, even though some days it's really hard, some days it's really exhausting, other days it's super rewarding. And I'm probably right where I'm supposed to be right now doing this work. So,
that's so interesting, because when we think about the pathways, everybody's pathway is a little bit different into the work. But oftentimes when we ask people to just pause and reflect, whether they're a diversity, equity, and inclusion leader or not, if they're a leader of any type, we'll have people who say, oh, no, I've never done DEI work. I've never done of any background. And we say, no, just pause for a second. Like you said at the beginning, pause, right? Stop, rest, and think about it. Have you done this work? Where has the idea of belonging or inclusion shown up for you? Mm-hmm. Oftentimes people will stop and it's in that moment of reflection. They're like, well, actually, when I was, then fill in the blank, right? With these really telling stories. And I think the thing that really surprises me about that is the fact that it is happening, but we haven't always had the language for it, or we haven't always called it that. Right. And so people think that this is all new and they've never seen it before. And it's a new experience. So they don't have any background in it.
Right.
Yeah. It's so fascinating to me. Okay. So now you're doing the work. We're lucky to have you as a colleague in the field. I'm curious, as you think about, diversity and inclusion strategies, what are some things that you have found to be most effective in different environments? So thinking about the work environment, all the different places that you've worked in, what are the strategies that leaders can integrate that are literally the most important?
It's interesting because I think sometimes when we come at this, people think it has to be something grandiose and big and this humongous, 5-year strategy that you're going to take on, which, you should have a strategy that should have multi-levels and all departments involved. You should have that. But when it comes to the individual, so if we're talking individual and we're talking organizational or structural, the things that an individual can do, that is happening day to day, every day. I think the most effective are the smallest things that each person takes upon themselves to do in a given day. And even when you say diversity, people think that's something specific, but I'm like, if you really think about it, just making people feel valued, making people feel seen, heard, caring about their careers, caring about them as people. How can I help you succeed and move forward? How can I help you navigate situations? How can I help you get additional skills? So you hear how I'm starting all of that. How can I help you? How can I help you? How can I help you? As leaders, that's the way we're supposed to be thinking. How can I help them? How can I help them? And if everybody's, looking around and seeing how can they help each other, that's going to move the whole organization forward. So I think focusing in on the small everyday interactions that people are having, I think that is super effective, because if everybody's focusing in on what they can do and doing it, then you're going to have that full cultural change. But if you get into an organization and people are like, oh, we have somebody that does diversity and inclusion, we have a chief diversity officer, and she or he works on that. No, it's not going to work, because she or he, depending on, unless your company is like 3 people, then maybe, but most companies are pretty big, or not pretty big, but most companies are sizable. And so you can't have one person over here who's doing all the work and nobody else is paying attention to it. So it won't permeate the organization. So that's why I tell people, I said, it might be in my job title, but it's implicitly in everybody's job description to be working on diversity, equity, and inclusion in any way that they are able, can, given what they're, where they fall in an organization. Everybody can do something. So I think that strategy is important, individual actions. Also, I think having that structural piece where you start looking at processes, practices, procedures, that's important too. I think that is probably even more important than the individual piece, because you're going to have some individuals who are just not about it. And that doesn't involve me. I don't want to do it. And that's a whole other conversation about, really, so it doesn't involve you. So if this is the way that the company is going, but you don't want to do it, should you be here? That's a whole other conversation. But while you're working on the individual strategies, then having those structural policies, processes, procedures, practices, customs, trying to figure out how you can work on those to make them more equitable, to make them more inclusive. I think that will have more of an impact. So if both of these things are working in tandem, if you're working on both of them at the same time, I know that that moves organizations forward. Sometimes the issue comes in where you might just be doing all the individual work, and nothing structural or systemic. So then that's not going to work. You might be doing all of the systemic work, putting policies and practices and procedures in place, and nobody's on board. None of the individuals are really trying to hear you. So it's not going to work. Like, you have to be doing both of them at the same time. And it's a lot. Can I just say right now, pause and be like, it's a lot sometimes. I don't know if people understand how hard, and as a practitioner, how hard this work is, in particular to change hearts and minds. It is hard, and to keep it front and center for people, and to keep it in their mind, and to show them and tell them that this is something that you need to get into the habit of thinking about and habitually practice. It's hard. It is.
I agree. And I think, though, it's so rewarding, right? Like it's one of those things where if you do it and you do it well, it's so rewarding. And that's what keeps people coming back to it. So knowing that it's hard, what are some of the things that you do to keep things front and center and to bring people along in the conversation, meeting them where they are? What are some of your, if we opened up your toolbox and we got to see some of the tools that you find to be most effective, what would that look like?
I really try to listen to people and to see what their needs are. But what I also try to do is look for those folks that don't seem to be engaged and try to make a connection with them and try to build those relationships so that we have that pathway that I can say, come on, let's talk about this. And they're like, oh, I know her. Oh, we've been good together. She seems nice. Let me listen to what she's saying. Let me hear what she's talking about. I also try to, if somebody is saying something that runs counter to what might be correct, I don't shut them down. You're wrong, and jump on them, or I don't do that. I mean, there's some people out there that will, and that's how they want to operate. But, kind of the more bees with honey theory, I'm not being overly nice, but I'm saying open, like, okay, I'm listening to you because I'm saying I want you to hear me. I want to hear you. And then try to have that dialogue. I think that also disarms some people because they expect that I'm going to be a certain way, that I'm going to tell them, no, and you shouldn't, and you're wrong. They expect that. And so then when you get I didn't know she was going to listen, or I didn't know she was going to be open to hearing what I had to say, or I didn't know she wasn't going to attack me, then that disarms them. So that's some of what I do to kind of bring people along. I also like to meet people where they are, just talking to them about their experiences, finding out. Because if somebody's coming at you and they're like, I read Ibrahim Kendi, I'm like, okay, you're out here. Versus someone who's like, well, I live in this particular place, and there's not a lot of diversity where I live. I'm like, okay, maybe they have a little further to go in their journey. So you really have to listen to where people are to kind of bring them along, instead of a one size fits all. And all of this is very labor intensive. That's why it's so slow too, because it's kind of one at a time. So,
one of the things that's fascinating is we say that what we want to do is we want to bring people along and we want to help them like on their journey. But a lot of times I feel like as practitioners, we get a little impatient. We're like, come on, we already know where you want to go. We know it, right? And so it does become really difficult. And it can be tiresome when you're like, wait, no, actually, I have to start from wherever you are. I can't start from where I want you to be. But it's almost like that go slow to go fast, right? That you have to kind of create that kind of relationship in order for things to grow. Now, here's my big question to you. That makes all the sense in the world to me. And I'm sure our listeners are like, oh yeah, absolutely. Because even if we weren't talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, that's how you create any kind of trust relationship, right? So we have to do that. How do you do that at a systems level? So when it's not the individual, but it's the system you're trying to bring.
Try to change the system. I mean, you can, like we said, you can put a policy, a procedure, a practice in place. You put it in place. But unless you get individuals to start to utilize it and not pull back and not push, unless you get that, it's not going to work. So you can create the systems that are equitable, the policies like, hey, you need to follow this, or hey, we're going to do it this way, so that we provide more opportunity for more diverse, a more diverse candidate pool or something. You put it in place, but and I know there's people trying to skirt it and people trying to find exceptions. And so then
very creative as human beings.
And so then that's problematic, because then you're not going to move along, because that individual has not bought in or figured out, why it's important that we do it this way. And here's what I will say around diversity, equity, and inclusion. That sometimes, talking about patience and impatience, like last year, everybody, a lot of people had an awakening, and now this year people are like, where are we? And I'm like, wait a minute. So, so society hasn't even gotten this right.
Right.
After all of this time. And I'm just talking, America, United States, because globally there's different issues, but in the United States, we haven't gotten it right after all this time. So I know y'all didn't think that in 1 year, these corporations were just going to boom, fix things. Like, I know you didn't think that. So if inside your corporation is a mirror to society, that's why, to me, it seems to take so long. Society has not even, outside the corporation, is not even gotten it all right. So why would inside, just because you walk into these doors proverbially or turn on your Zoom, however you go to work, that doesn't mean that what's happening, we know that now, what's happening externally is not bringing itself into the workplace. And I think that is some of the impediment too. Everybody's not on board when they leave. They're like, oh, we had to take this training. I don't want people to have to take a training. The way I want them to talk about learning with me is, I got the opportunity to hear from Sheri, to sit with Sheri, to learn with Sheri. Not I had to take a training. I had to take a diversity training, and so that's why, to me, it takes so long. And it will take long. And I was talking to my dad last night. He was like, we're not going to see it in my lifetime, and not in yours either. I was like, thanks for lifting me up. And I was like, okay. But there's, people feel that way because it's been a long time coming, and we're not there yet.
Yeah.
And
it's interesting because you got to have that like urgency and that patience. It's like patient urgency, which seems like they're in contradiction, and they kind of are in contradiction, but there are moments, right, where that's the only way to survive in this space. You have to be urgent and understand why it's important, but you have to have the patience to bring people along with you.
Right.
Well,
I like that. Patient
Patient
urgency.
urgency. Yeah.
Ooh, if I use it, I'm going to be like, this is from Deanna.
Well, Sheri, it was lovely to talk to you today, to sit still for a second and be able to have a conversation with you. So just want to say thank you so much for being able to be here with us today and sharing your wisdom. So in this week's episode, we got a chance to talk about this idea of sitting for a second, of patient urgency, of being able to make sure that you have both things working at the same time, that it's not just people and it's not just operations. You got to have both of those. We always talk about it in our structure as people, practices, and operations, that there's really three levels of it. But however you dissect it, that these things have to be working almost all the time. You have to be working at the same time together. So we're so excited that you all were able to join us here for another episode. We would love to hear your thoughts. So please feel free to comment on our website at upliftingimpact.com, or you can provide your direct comments to us through LinkedIn. You can either do that on my page, on Uplifting Impact's page, or on Justin Ponder's page. And until next week, we just want to say thank you so much and continue to share, because we here at Uplifting Impact really believe that the more people who are having this conversation, the more people who are willing to be urgent and also willing to be patient and work alongside one another, the more change we can have in the world. So thank you. Thank you.